Hi, I'm Doug Draper with Acme Distribution and the Denver Transportation Club. I'm pleased to present a 10-episode series, Supply Chain and Logistics, the Storytellers. The series is brought to you by Cap Logistics, and Cap Logistics is experts offering you customized transportation solutions for every need. Visit caplogistics.com today. So today's topic I'm really excited about. It's going to discuss what's going on with the Central 70 project, and I'm very fortunate to have Rebecca White with us from CDOT, and also Matt Sanman from Kiewit Construction, which is a major player in the event. So thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming. So I think the easiest thing to do is just jump right into this, right? Let's talk about some context, if you will, and maybe we start with the beginning as far as how long has this been started and developed, and not just, hey, it starts next week, but let's back up several years and kind of get the backstory.
Yeah, you have to back up a long ways with this project. Just to give you an indication of the magnitude of this for the state, so this is a $1.2 billion project. It is the largest undertaking CDOT has ever had. The closest comparison was the reconstruction of I-25 about a decade ago, which is sort of affectionately known as T-Rex.
Sure, I remember that.
Yeah. And because of the fact that I-70 is an interstate, because of the magnitude of the project, we had to go through a really extensive study that was guided by the federal government. Because of some of the complexities of this project, that study was even longer than it is in most cases. So we started in 2003.
Wow.
Saying, we know we've got a problem out there. We've got a viaduct that is deteriorating, congestion that's growing. Those are our two main problems. How do we find the right solution? And one of the points of that, or the purposes of a study process, is to give a voice to the people who are most impacted, which is both the neighborhoods and the users of the interstate. And that process took a long time. So from 2003 to up to probably about 2012, we were still trying to figure out what we're going to build. And then from 2012 up to about 2017, we were studying what we thought we should build and getting the final federal approvals. So it's been a long road. It was an important one. I think we needed to go through that process, but we are ready to start building the sucker now. Yeah.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
So what in that 15-year time frame, like what was the biggest challenge to get things set, right? You're prepping the table to get things going. What were some of the challenges you experienced?
Yeah, the congestion issue is always a little easier to solve because we know we need a wider highway and a safer highway. Interstate 70 was built in 1964. It really hasn't seen anything happen to it since that time. We had a population of about 3 million people in the 1960s
for
in
the
Colorado.
state.
We were planning at that point. It was the Department of Highways for Colorado of the 1980s. And then here we are in a tremendous high growth time, and the 2000s stuck with this interstate that was 50 years old. So that we knew we needed more capacity. We knew we needed to redesign the highway for the modern traveler. We don't all drive these tiny cars anymore. So that wasn't as much the difficulty as really trying to figure out what to do with the viaduct.
Right.
When the highway was built in the 60s, the engineers at that time put over 2 miles of the interstate up 30 feet in the air.
Yeah, what was the rationale behind that?
I've looked into the history of it, and I've heard everything from cost savings to realizing that an at-grade highway, especially through a neighborhood area, wouldn't have been acceptable. So I don't know. They certainly didn't have things like the National Environmental Policy Act and all the rules we have back in the 1960s. But there is evidence of quite a bit of a community dialogue. It was a tough decision even then. But we had the legacy of that. So we've got homes today that are mere feet from the viaduct that were left there. This is a community that's designated as environmental justice, which means that folks there are relatively low income, largely minority, and that requires us to take an even more cautious approach to finding the right solution. And whatever happens right there, I'm talking the viaduct, is hugely impactful to that neighborhood. So understanding what their concerns were and balancing that with the fact that we knew that viaduct is falling apart on us. We've got 10 hours of congestion out there. We can't study this forever.
Right. Yeah, that's really tricky because you're going from commercial highway and then smack dab in this residential community, and then it goes back to industrial.
Yep.
That would be I bet most of the engagement and buy-in was probably related to the residential aspect of it more than anything.
Yep.
Interesting. Let's see here. So a couple other things we want to talk about. This show is really focused on transportation, logistics, and although we've talked about the impact of the residential community, I want to focus now on the impact of the business segment. A lot of folks listening to the show are companies that have businesses along the commercial side of the Central 70 project, from Colorado east, not only with trucking companies with wheels on the ground moving on the highway, and also businesses there. So talk about the engagement you had with that group. Did you literally walk down the highway and knock on doors and say, hey guys, what do you think about the expansion? Talk about the commercial side, if you will, of the engagement.
And just to add a data point to what your listeners probably already know, we counted the businesses, and there are 1,200 located within a quarter mile of I-70.
Okay, that was my next question.
Mm-hmm. They employ 26,000 people. So, I mean, this is a major industrial freight corridor, and you have companies like the Safeway Distribution Center that's sending hundreds of trucks in and out every day. We've got UPS, FedEx, Manipro, Purina. In fact, that's a lot of the reasons that I-70 was put where it is today, is because those industries were there in the 1930s.
Sure.
They followed the rail lines, and
of course,
and then congestion backed up on what was then this little local road, and so it became an interstate. When we've talked to the businesses, we've done a lot of one-on-one, we've done mailings, we've had probably 300 public meetings on this project that have had a good business presence. The groups that you all have been able to help bring us together have been really helpful as well. We basically heard two things. I-70 needs to change. It's, bumper to bumper congestion, and then a worry about construction. That, that the freight distribution in particular did not want to have to sit through 4 years of construction. And that really, CDOT took that to heart, which is why one of the restrictions we put on the contractor is they can't shut down the interstate during the day. So it's 3 lanes in each direction right now, and even though they're doing this massive construction project, they can only close lanes at night.
Right.
And that's a hindrance for Kiewit, but we really didn't have a choice, because this interstate's our economic lifeline. We call it our backbone a lot. We have all these businesses that depend on it, and we couldn't, just shut it down to rebuild it.
Oh, of course. Yeah, that wouldn't fly.
Nope.
So speaking of the commercial aspect of it, so that really starts at the Safeway DC that you've made reference to, which is 70 in Colorado Boulevard. So let's talk about from there out to Chambers Road, I think.
Correct.
Is where the end. So give us a visual of what, talk to the audience and paint a picture of what that's going to look like when it's all said and done.
The final highway?
Correct.
Yeah. Matt, do you want to?
Yeah, so currently got typically 3 lanes in each direction along the highway. What we're going to be doing, and some of the impacts that the commuters will see, is some lane shifts kind of in that eastern section of the project. So kind of our scope, and what Rebecca was touching on before, is we do have rules of what we can close, and making sure traffic gets through there. So simple lane shifts, pushing everybody to the center, allows us to build our widenings to the north and south, and then eventually flip-flop traffic out to there, rebuild the center, and then spread it out to its existing alignment. So, kind of phasing like that. When it's done, you'll have 3 lanes in each direction, a toll lane in each direction, and then kind of new on and off ramps that meet the current design standards and safety standards that exist today. So you'll have a wider, prettier highway and much safer. And I know CDOT's got a lot of cool renderings on their project website, kind of showing what some of that'll look like. But ultimately, that's kind of the phasing and what you can expect to see.
On the toll piece of it, I know up in the mountains that was pretty successful when, heading up there in the summer, and especially during ski season. One of the things is no trailers, no trucks in that eastbound lane. You talked about the toll road. Who's allowed in that road? And give us an idea what the fees would look like if, as you're traveling through that 7-mile stretch.
10-mile stretch.
Okay.
So we haven't set a price yet. So this will be a CDOT managed express lane or toll lane. It's going to look and feel and operate a lot like US 36, I-25, even C-470. So the toll will be set to keep traffic flowing. but it'll be probably at a rate about what the other highways are right now. We're probably about 3 or 4 years out from setting that rate.
Okay.
It's not that trucks are prohibited from the express lane, but it is quite expensive.
Right.
So I think from what I've heard by practice, the trucks avoid those lanes because
Sure.
it'd be quite a price. But the advantage of what those do is they draw traffic away from the general purpose lane, so everybody benefits.
Sure.
So folks are using them because they're desperate to get to daycare. They're trying to catch a flight. You know, they've got a real reason why they can't afford to slow down even a little bit. And when they pull over to use that lane, it helps everyone breathe a little bit. And we've got some good data on how that's played out on US 36 and I-25. So
What percentage, just curiosity, do people use that lane when you say, all right, there's 100 cars moving through this corridor? Are 20% of them jumping over there and taking advantage of the lane, or is it less or more? Talk about.
it depends on the time of day. I mean, they're obviously more popular in the commute times.
Sure.
And when you just kind of look around the area anecdotally, you see cars in those lanes during those times. So we see people use them, and then they're not going to pay when everything's flowing, right?
Sure.
If I can travel for free at 55 miles per hour, I'm not going to choose to use the express lane. So they get very high utilized during those high commute or times when the interstate is just not functioning. We've got a lot of great data on 36 and I-25 that I'd have to pull for you for another show, but
Sure.
they are working. It has another advantage to CDOT because, you know, we haven't seen an increase in the gas tax for the last 20 years. We don't really have a good source of funding for transportation right now. So it is both allows us to have a sustainable system that we don't have to keep widening and widening and widening. Because of the rate Colorado is growing, that just doesn't make sense. So we
Sure.
can encourage carpooling and always keep one lane flowing, but then it also gives us a revenue source that we don't have right now.
Gotcha. So it's not a public-private partnership where it's a third party in there generating revenue, or is it?
It is.
Okay.
It's different from the only other big public-private partnership CDOT has done is US 36.
Mm-hmm.
That also had an express lane, but the toll revenues there went to our partner. For Central 70, it'll be a toll lane, but the revenues come to the state. So we pay Kiewit Meridian Partners differently through essentially an annual payment.
Okay. So you are the private aspect of the.
Yeah, so we have a
public-private.
developing arm for the company, so
Okay.
or for the contract. So Kiewit Meridian Partners is kind of the financier, developer for the project, Kiewit being the lead contractor to that developer. And then for the next 35 years, 30 years?
34, I think, yep.
33 and a half.
It's a long marriage.
Long marriage. So we will be operating and maintaining the roadway from pothole repair, trash pickup, guardrail repair for the next 30 plus years.
Wow. Is that a fixed rate? Like, here's X number of dollars on an annual basis, or is it based on usership, if that's even the correct word to
It's a
use,
fixed rate. However, if for any reason Kiewit Meridian Partners doesn't perform, they're not plowing the road at the levels we've set, they're not fixing guardrail, we make deductions from that payment. But otherwise, it's a fixed payment, which is helpful for CDOT because we can budget that.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Yeah, there's very few other aspects of transportation where you can lock in costs for a 30-year period. And so we know exactly what this corridor will cost.
Is 30.
And then we have to figure out what it costs.
yeah, exactly.
There you go. You're the ones that have to figure out what's it going to cost 15,
Yeah.
20 years down the
Yep.
road.
Yep.
So that's great. Being in the industry myself, you hear anecdotal bits of information. One of the things out there that we've heard is they should make E470 free to allow trucks, instead of going straight and turning, if you're going west on 70, hang a left down I-25, use E470 at no cost to help with construction and the general congestion during construction. Tell me about that. Is that real? Is it perceived? Is it a pipe dream?
I've heard that too. However, E470 is a private entity. That is not a road under the state system. So it's not something that CDOT has the ability to require or make happen. They are operating that road to make a profit. Yeah. So I've heard it too. Certainly share that with E470, but
Right.
yeah, it's sort of out of our purview.
Gotcha. Has it been approached at all? Have you asked the question of that group that owns the road to say, hey, can you reduce tolls? Or, I mean, has that dialogue even happened, I guess?
It has not. It has not yet.
Gotcha. Suggestions on 270? Yes. I see a lot of smiles on the other side of the table, because as it is now, I mean, we know that elevated section. Anyway, we could talk about the good and the bad at 270, but I'm expecting it's not good now. It's going to get worse during the construction is my perception. So what have you guys thought about with 270 and some things that you can do to alleviate? Hey, I'm spinning off and using 270, and it's going to get crazy.
You know, the one thing we actually expect is because 270 is already so bad, it can't absorb any more traffic.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, you might think, oh, people are going to avoid I-70 and take I-270. Once you try that once and you get stuck in traffic. So I don't think I-270 can take anything else. We absolutely need to fix that road and add capacity, and that's, you know, it's in the list of the ballot measure that's coming up. It's on our long-term plans. But part of how we try to reduce the tendency to do that is by keeping I-70 running during construction. That fact that, you know, the speed limits are going to stay the same. We want people to be safe and acknowledge it's a work zone, but 3 lanes in each direction. You know, keep the highway running so that it's, you know, it's got 10 hours of congestion today, but maybe we can keep it sort of operating at least, you know, at a level it is today so people aren't, we don't want them pouring into the neighborhoods either. We've had a lot of conversations about that.
That was exactly my next question is, where do you see some of the congestion points, or people saying, oh, I'm going to save a few dollars or some time, and I'm going to go down this residential
We
area.
always suggest that you're not going to find any time savings kind of on the local streets, and kind of our message to commuters traveling east and west is, you know, stay on the highway. The lanes is the capacity you have today, getting off on the local streets where you got drainage work, utility work, new local bridges that are being built. I would imagine the time savings might actually be negative in those regards. So we encourage everyone to use the highway.
Yeah, I would think that it's just human instinct to say, I'm getting off this highway, which actually leads me to believe, or leads to talk about Stapleton Drive north and south. So what happens there? Is there going to be any changes during construction? Are those 2 arteries going to be eliminated whenever the road's expanded? So talk about those 2 sections.
So there is a rebuild of Stapleton north and south, and part of our initial phasing is getting those roads built kind of at the beginning so we can get those operating. Part of our phasing is to get those, and then once we kind of switch traffic on the main lanes, hopefully those are operating at the additional capacity and kind of the safer roadway that they're going to be.
Gotcha. But they will be there when the project's all said and done. Those 2 roads will still be there.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of businesses right along Stapleton Drive, so
I know.
They depend on that route for sure.
It's crazy. We talked about how you just put a neighborhood right in the middle of a commercial zone. I live in the Stapleton neighborhood, and it's funny just how the traffic flow. There was an airport here, right? That's the whole reason. And 270 is kind of funky the way it goes up, and everything else. And I think Stapleton Drive north and south are kind of that way. So it's good to know that those are still going to be there and everything. So
with sidewalks and, you know, a few other improvements that aren't out there today. Yeah,
that's terrific.
Because anytime we for this project touch a city street, it has to be rebuilt to today's city standards. That's particularly the case on 46th Avenue. If anyone's ever tried to walk along there, it's, you know, if you're lucky, a dirt path kind of along the side of the road. And when we return it, it'll have 8-foot sidewalks and tree lawns and lighting.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of returning a pedestrian and bike network as well that does not exist today.
Yeah.
Stapleton Drive's a little bit better, but I think it'll be even safer and better when you guys are done.
Yeah. That's terrific. So if you were, you own a trucking company, right? And Rebecca, you're a driver, and you're driving from the mountains out to the plains of Kansas in the thick of construction, right? And you're behind the wheel. What's the truck driver going to see? What's he going to look like when he's in the middle of construction? You talked about 3 lanes on each side. Everything's going to change. Being devil's advocate, I kind of think that would be kind of hard as a truck driver. So talk to me about what they're going to see and what they should and shouldn't do as they're driving that corridor during construction.
Yeah, so one thing we really haven't touched on yet is the lowered section of the highway with the 4-acre cover on top. And so that'll be where the existing viaduct is today, just east of the Purina facility. But in that whole section where we're, building down below grade, building the new westbound lanes first, all that's to the north of the existing highway. Really, road users won't be able to really notice it or see it. So kind of the construction curiosity kind of goes away there. And then as you move into the central and the eastern portion of the project, like I said, it's just, simple lane shifts and a little bit shorter or less wide lanes, if that's a technical term. Reduce them down to about 11-foot lanes. But you'll just be seeing through those sections construction activity to the north and south, protected by barrier, but the alignment stays the same. You might get a few ramp closures here and there, but all that has to be phased in a pretty strict contract of what we can change, what we can close and duration we can close them. So,
right.
It'll look a lot like I-25 has done recently, and that's a project that's going through a widening right now. And there's a lot of truck traffic on that too.
Yeah.
But it gets a little tighter as traffic is shifted to the inside. Things tend to slow down a little bit because of that. But it'll look and feel, at least on that eastern section, just like every other project the truck drivers have been through.
Yeah.
It is interesting what Matt said about the viaduct staying up for the first 2 years. It may actually be that truck drivers are the only people that will have that ability to look down and kind of see what's to see that digging. So for folks listening, don't break and do that. Just keep driving and check the webcam. But
curiosity. That'll happen. So essentially, trust the vision, right? You guys have thought about this. It's 15 plus years in the making, and you get it. And you've thought of all I'm going to turn off here to save time or do this. Basically, the message is trust the vision. You've worked all this out. Stay on the highway. There'll be some lane shifts, but other than that, keep on.
And follow along with the. I don't know, maybe you're going to say the same thing, but we've got text alerts and web updates and email blasts, and we really encourage folks to sign up for those tools so that they, when you're in Kansas and want to know exactly what you're driving into, that you can start checking in with those tools.
Gotcha.
And use the technology at hand. We'll be communicating a lot of these closures to Waze, which feeds Google Maps, which feeds all of our navigation. So, knowing what ramps are closed for a duration or just kind of, knowing what the quickest way through or which route to go is directly communicated with those technologies.
Right. Will there be any signs that, I was just thinking about this, when you're heading up to the mountains, hour and 20 minutes to Vail and time markers, I guess. Has there been any thought about that? So when I'm heading into the belly of the beast during construction, I know I'm going to be, it's going to take me 35 minutes to get through here. I don't know, has that been...
I don't think so, and I just don't know if we have the real estate along the highway to
be able to have that up while major construction is happening. Yeah, I mean, we will use VMS signs to alert people to closures. There are a handful of times that Kiewit will fully shut down the interstate. We're talking a full weekend closure, a full overnight closure. You're going to be sick of hearing from us leading up to that, because that is when we really get the word out so that everyone knows as they're sort of entering that stretch of interstate that it's closed for X amount of time.
Sure.
Maybe we can come back on this program.
Yeah. Not when it's closed.
Before.
Right, when
and not after.
So how many times how many times will there be a full closure during the construction process?
I believe, this is testing my memory.
I was just looking at you.
I think 4 weekend closures and 6 overnight.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm close.
Yeah.
It's around that number.
And then we have a commitment of 2 major traffic pattern changes, and those will mostly be revolving around that lowered section.
Yeah.
Good deal. Well, the program is all about storytellers, and we appreciate you telling your story. If I just moved to Colorado in just a few short seconds, what would be the story you would say to the individual that just moved here?
Welcome to Colorado.
Hopefully we made a prettier highway for you to enter the city on.
Yeah, I-70 is one of the 2 lifelines in the state, I-25 and I-70, and we're about to make a pretty significant change to one that'll keep the state moving and make it a less frustrating experience for everyone.
Yeah. Well, we're in it together.
We are.
And I appreciate us being together today to talk about this. So
yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that. And thanks for joining us today on Connect and Collaborate Network, featuring supply chain and logistics, the Storytellers. And you had a great story today. So thanks again. Our show is brought to you by Cap Logistics. You guys have a great afternoon, okay?
Thanks,
Same to you.
too.
Thanks.